Basher, sexaholic. We're not going to be kind and gentle. We're not going to avoid crosstalk. If you say something I don't agree with, you're going to hear about it.
It's easy at this point.
Thank you. Okay, you got me decked out here. Okay. Oh. This is a relapse prevention workshop. You think the guy's okay?
Maybe
My codependency.
you got more people here than Rabbi Cutler gets.
Yeah. You want to say that one into the mic?
Sure. Just tell him sex sells.
Okay.
That's what happens when you say the no crosstalk is gone.
Right. By the way, I have never seen a handheld collection of my. This was the first. Only where you got Jews, right? And then Eli whispered. Then Eli.
Guys in this room, they're going to do it to everybody else.
Yeah, but Eli whispered afterwards, and if they don't give, he says, I could come home and get it from you. Okay, guys. I get a lot from people where I hear,
Guys, just sit.
okay, you need some more chairs. We running out of chairs?
That's all right. It'll never start if you don't.
Okay. We hear a whole lot, I hear a whole lot, people coming up to me and say, oh, I just had a slip, I just masturbated. Or they'll say, oh, I just had a slip, I picked up a prostitute. That's not the slip. That's the result of the slip. The slip is not the masturbation. The masturbation is a result of the slip. And until you can jump through that hoop, it's tough. Because the disease isn't the masturbation. The disease causes the masturbation. And by the way, when we went around the room, you noticed I didn't say my MO. Yes, it is my MO. I said my disease. Yes, I need to be reminded every moment of the day that I have an incurable disease that will never go away. I'm going to take it to my grave. It's just like my high blood pressure. If you take my blood pressure with one of those sphygmomanometers, it's going to be normal. Because I took my blood pressure pill early this morning. But let me get off my blood pressure medicine, which I used to do time and again, because I get a normal blood pressure reading. And I'd say, oh, look, it's normal now. I don't need to take that pill every day. And then I stop taking the pill, and it usually takes about 6 weeks, and my blood pressure is right back where it was. It's an incurable disease. I inherited it. My dad had high blood pressure. My mother had high blood pressure. This is a statistically genetic disease. It runs in families. You just might not know about it in your family yet, but it runs in families. Yeah. Eli saw a picture of my great-grandfather on the computer yesterday with his long white beard and all. We know at least he had 6, 7 wives. I've found 4 of them so far, genetically. I mean, through documents. And my little old 92-year-old aunt a few weeks ago was saying, yeah, and my brother caught my grandfather getting a blow job where he worked from one of the women in his office that he worked. I mean, she's using terms like this, my little old 92-year-old aunt. And then she says to me, and by the way, this was 2 weeks ago or so, I helped get Mike, your sister's husband, into law school by giving a blowjob to the judge. This is the family I was born into. And she said, and by the way, my children don't like me to talk this way. And I said, well, I understand. I'm in a recovery program, she knows. And then when my mother was in her 80s, and we moved her into a retirement center, and, you know, she's a Brooklyn Jewish type gal. We moved her into this, down in Nashville, to this retirement center where there were no basically other Jews. And one of my sons said to her, Grandma, now that you're here, it's best if you don't talk about sex all the time, Grandma, to these women. You know, I get it honestly. My brother was a rabbi and had this disease severely and picked up a hitchhiker to have sex with. And he was 43 and he had a bad heart, and the hitchhiker kidnapped him. And he jumped out of the car, told the hitchhiker he had this bad heart, couldn't take it, and he jumped out of the car and he went to a telephone and called my sister-in-law that he was just kidnapped, and he ran out, and a cop was there, and he told the cop, and he dropped dead on the spot. 3 young kids. This was before I was in recovery. And so I went to the Shiva, and I was torn up. My older brother and was torn up, and I was at the Shiva for the week in St. Louis. And my family was there, and we came back to Nashville, and I got in my car, and they got in their car, and I was going back to the office. And do you know what the first thing I did in my car from the airport? Take a guess. I picked up a hitchhiker to have sex with. And I get home that evening, another aunt from the alcoholic side of my family, not the sex-alcoholic side of my family. My little aunt and my wife said, we were behind you in that car. Why did you pick up a hitchhiker? I didn't know they were in the car behind me. Why did you pick up a hitchhiker? And, you know, so naturally I just lied. Oh, he was a patient of mine, and I felt badly for him. I mean, those lies are they just come right out, you know. And I am without power. And I have this disease that's incurable. And so, how do I prevent a relapse? Because it's going to be hard to beat my story. And yet, I've been sober since I came into this program 26 years ago. One day at a time. And what was it? We didn't have a big book back then, wasn't written. There were two of us. The guy who brought me in, he started in Nashville. He brought me in, and after 6 months, he decided he was ready to start making out with this gal, and apparently he wasn't, because a few weeks later, he found this little old lady that he was doing obscene phone calls with, and he cut her heart out. And he went to jail for life. And I just wept. This what was going to happen now to me. The hell with him. What was going to happen to me? Without a sponsor, without anything. Yeah. And by the way, I would go visit him in jail, and he decided that SA was shit, and that it couldn't work, and that the only answer was Jesus Christ. And so he would keep sending me letters and letters trying to convert me. And he'd send me books after books. And I'd go to my AA sponsor, who was Catholic and who knew him, and I would say, what do? I keep writing him back nice little notes, but the letters are getting bigger and bigger in the books. And he'd say, you don't open the letter and you never respond to it. And I said, but how? How can I do that? He saved my life. And my sponsor said, no, Harvey, you got it all screwed up. He didn't save your life. God saved your life and used him. We're the vessels. And how do we keep that vessel from cracking repeatedly? It's not from avoiding masturbation, because we can't avoid it. We're going to wake up in the middle of the night with an erection, a piss erection. By the way, that's all that erection is. It just is giving you a signal to take a leak. It does not mean you have to grab it and work it over. It's an important concept. Do you guys not talk this way in Lakewood? I know a lot of guys that...
We do, but not at 8 a.m.
Right. I know a lot of guys in the program, they think their shit saran wrapped. Yes, we need to say all this to be aware that what am I getting to? I'm getting to that it's not in my pelvic area where the problem is. It's between my ears. Roy was inspired to use, unlike any other S fellowship, he uses the word lust. It does not say anywhere we are powerless over sexually acting out. Does not say we are powerless for step one over masturbation. It says we are powerless over lust. And what the hell is lust? By the way, I forgot this was being taped. I can see it now. People coming up to me. from Germany. Oh my God, why the way you spoke. By the way, you know, guys, as I said it over at JSS, my mind's been blown away past month. This, I've been getting few people from Iran who calls me for recovery. And the reaction from that first call from Iran, and I just panicked. First of all, I'm still so sick. And I was convinced the CIA was going to come after me. And that they're going to say I'm conspiring with people in Iran. And then the guy started to talk about politics, and I knew this was it. And I said to him, I don't talk politics. This is about SA. And if you want to call me, it needs to be about recovery. But I get these calls, and I get to see that their problems there are just like ours. Wherever I get calls from, they're the same calls, same questions, same issues. It's in here, between my ears. I am not able to have a sexual fantasy successfully. It's the toughest concept possible to get across to people in this program, especially chronic relapsers. That it is in the motion picture that the endorphins start rolling, and that the phenomenon of craving begins. And so, for me, relapse prevention each day is that I do tools to prevent the two-dimensional photograph that I get repeatedly through the day. I'm shivering, it's so cold, man. That I get periodically through the day, that two-dimensional photograph, that I need to use my tools at that two-dimensional photograph before it turns into a motion picture. Now, many guys don't realize this is happening in their brain. They automatically go into the motion picture. So when I see some gal walking down the street, quite often I see her vagina. I get a visual hallucination. See, I'm insane. And the characteristics of insanity is delusional thinking of psychosis and visual and auditory hallucinations. So when a woman says hello, I get an auditory hallucination. I hear her saying, let's have sex immediately. And when a woman walks by, instead of seeing her dress, I see her vagina. Two-dimensional photograph. By the way, a lot of you guys have it easy because you just have to watch it with one half of the population. I'll do it with men too. I'll see erections out of nowhere. I mean, nothing's safe, including dogs, for me. So what happens is I get these hallucinations and these delusional thinking. And so when I see that visual picture of a vagina, it's in a two-dimensional form. If I don't do something immediately, it will turn into a fantasy, and I will be having sex. Will be a motion picture. And I often ask people to picture what's going on in their brain like you picture the film in the camera, where it's, what is a motion picture? Naturally, most of you guys never go look at movies. You never go to the cinema. Pornos are okay, but not the cinema. So what is it? It's, what is that motion picture you don't go to see? By the way, you know I'm teasing, but I also know this. I get so many calls from people from all over the world that I know, guess what? You're just like any other sex addict. You know, that's how we are. That's how we're made. That's why, by the way, I've sponsored for years a Jesuit priest. Priests are really sacred guys. They're really dedicated. But about 10% of them have this disease too. And they do all kinds of stuff just like we do, because they have the same disease we have. It's a real disease, guys. And so, how to train yourself to see your thoughts as this motion picture that's made really of single frames. They're just single frames. And how to begin to identify the first frame. The first frame was when I saw her vagina, when I saw his erection. That's the first frame. That frame is what Jess says is on God. That's how he made me. That's what I do. That's how my brain's made. I see people naked who are dressed. That's how he made me. That's the first look, the first scene. It's when I take the second look, that's the first drink. That's the first drink. That second look is when I don't say, when that picture of a vagina comes in, God, whatever it is I'm looking for in her vagina, may I find in you. God, may she be freed from acting out on her lust today like you're freeing me from acting out on mine. God, thank you for reminding me I'm still sick. Whatever the hell the words you want to use, whatever you want to do, if it's not done at that first frame, you've had it. Because once it turns into a motion picture, trying to stop the phenomenon of craving is like trying to stop pissing in midstream. And I wish you well. But he keeps telling me he could do it. There's always one in a crowd, right?
He can't have a diarrhea.
Harvey, is it crossed up?
No.
When I hear that, that scares literally the hell out of me, because my view of this is, I call that hell. I'm sorry. I call that hell. I want to be in a position, and that's my view of this in 2 months, and I'm still step one. But my view of this thing is, if I have God in my life, no, these things don't work that way. I recoil. I'm not tempted by lust, because I have God in my life and I have the steps. If I came in here as a newcomer and I heard this speech, I want to be the hell out the door.
Yeah. I wish you luck. I wish you luck. That's how the disease manifests. Because if I had diabetes or my high blood pressure, I could bring God into the equation all I want. And you know, he's so omnipotent, so powerful, that if an alcoholic takes an open bottle of liquor, a recovering alcoholic, and puts it to his lips, God is so powerful he could knock it out of his hands. But statistically, he doesn't do that.
Isn't that the promise of the big book? Isn't that what it says?
What does it say?
We recoil from such temptation. We don't get involved.
First of all, it says we will know a new freedom and a new happiness. Okay. The new freedom for me is the awareness that my best thinking screws me up. And that what the big book says is we had to let go of our old ideas. See, steps don't work for many people. Now, this is a relapse issue here, okay? And by the way, you could find holes in not only everything I say, because I'm the biggest bullshitter around, and you could find holes in any of the AA book. But this is the gimmick here. Gimmick is, how do we surrender to something that's working for someone versus people who are really struggling, relapsing. So when it comes to relapse, you want to start analyzing out as best you can how you could prevent it. Now, how does relapse apply to everybody? Okay. It applies to everybody because you could be in a relapse and not even know it, meaning you could be back into these thoughts and not be even aware you're having relapse behavior. So what happens is we're trying to get some tools for how to get the lust worked on. Now, what you're saying is absolutely true, by the way. When lust comes in, I get the dry heaves. I totally recoil from it. I once had an experience where I was looking for someone in an office building, and I had to put my head in. And I put my head in, and this guy who was a trigger for me was in that office apparently, and my eyes met his eyes. Must have been sober 8-9 years at that time. And I just, perfect words, recoiled from it, got my head back out, but I already took in the drink, and I began to vomit and had the dry heaves for quite a while walking down the hall. Because today, my body recoils from the poison, not from the evil, not from the badness, because this program doesn't work for me if I'm bad getting good. It only works for me if I believe I'm sick getting well. And so when what I thought was my drug was really my poison, because I'm allergic to lust. I can't be allergic to sex because I have sex on a kind of regular, wouldn't mind it being more with my wife, but I have it on a regular basis usually. And by the way, I wouldn't mind it being more, but I don't let it become more because I'm an abusive husband. So that's one of the ways I have to watch my relapse prevention is not only with the lust in my head, but lust towards my wife. I have to treat the day after we're sexually intimate, I have to treat any thought of replaying what we did the night before as a pure sexual fantasy, and it is not permitted in my life today. Can't guarantee you tomorrow, but today. Not that it happened yesterday, but I'm referring figuratively. So today. And so when that first photograph of what we did the night before comes in my mind, I'm doing the same stuff. Now, I'm calling it stuff. It's what's in the essay book, in the chapter, How I Overcame My Obsession with Lust. Okay. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is I want to go around the room, since it's a workshop, and I want you guys to tell me where the relapse begins in your life.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Just a very quick question. You say the steps don't work for some people. For you, what role do the steps play in
Okay,
recovery?
thank you. The steps won't work for some people because, I'm glad you caught that, because they haven't done the first 5 paragraphs of chapter 5. The steps come, that list, on the second page of chapter 5. So what happens are people who tend to have chronic relapsing tend to say, oh, I'm doing the steps, I've done this, I believe in God, the program's not working for me. I come to meetings. It's those 5 paragraphs where it's going to say, I had to let go of my old ideas, etc. But the main one in it is about being honest with yourself. If you cannot become honest with yourself, as it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path, but there are those who don't get it because they're dishonest with themselves, some of us being constitutionally dishonest with ourselves. I think it says it 3 to 4 times. So until we're honest with ourselves, we tend to say, oh, I'm working the steps, but it's hard as hell to do step 1 if you're not honest with yourself. So many guys in the program get disappointed because they're doing everything they're told to do. They're working the steps, they wrote their first step, did the second, and it's not working for them. It's because of this dishonest with myself. Am I telling my sponsor things explicitly or sharing them? It's interesting what Chaim said. I had a very explicit dream last night about touching somebody's erection. Came out of nowhere last night. Could hardly fall back to sleep. It bothered me. What did I do? Within moments of seeing Eli, I told him my dream. I cannot keep that stuff. And as I'm saying it, and knowing I'm saying it, I realized there was a kid who abused me when I was 12 and a half, and I did some EMDR myself, and going back to that scene. I have to say it out. I have to be honest with myself. What's the honesty with myself? Let's use me as an example. The honesty with myself is, Harvey, you're giving a workshop today on relapse. You don't want people to know that you had an explicit dream last night. And so when I'm honest with myself, it's easier to tell someone, the dream. How one gets honest with themselves is part of that relapse prevention cycle. So you're going to want to get honest with yourself about how many of these first photographs you're sharing, and how quickly you're sharing with people, and how explicitly you're sharing. If someone ever calls me and says, Harvey, I've had a rough day, I've been lusting, I say to them, don't give me that shit word, lusting. I don't know what you're talking about. And many of you have been recipient to my doing that with you. And they'll say, oh, I was thinking about a woman. I said, oh, really? That means nothing to me. What do you mean you're thinking about a woman? Before you know it, you're hearing about you being held upside down and her spanking your butt. But it takes about 10 questions to get the darn truth out. And by the way, and this gets pretty close to us, the example I use and how dangerous that kind of sharing is, using the word lust and not being explicit. The example I use is what Hitler did. He called this most horrible thing the final solution. It was gassing and murdering and starving and torturing people. And he gets this word, the final solution. A pretty word. And how we use pretty words to hide from what we're thinking. And how impossibly heavy it is to keep this stuff inside alone without sharing it explicitly with people. So that's the other piece of the relapse prevention. Explicit sharing. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you do? People get triggered when you share with them explicitly.
Tough shit. I don't give a shit about you. I'm here to stay sober.
But they will tell me that I'm getting
tough shit. Let them walk away. In Nashville, we raise our hand if someone's getting too explicit, so the person stops talking, so the person who raised the hand could walk out of the room. And I'll tell you, you talk about being too explicit. All you have to do is say, oh, I'm thinking about sex today. I'm already triggered. Because my mind makes up what you're saying. Guys will call me and say, oh, I was thinking about having sex with this gal. Do you know what I do immediately if they're vague by saying sex with this gal? Usually, I picture someone having oral sex with a woman. And they are thinking something very different. So what happens if someone is too vague with me? It stimulates my disease because we think in pictures. And so when someone uses the word sex, I'm going to picture automatically what they mean. When they say it to me, first of all, I request that people on the phone, if they would, say to me, I'm going to be explicit now. That's what I do. I say, I'm going to be explicit now. That gives the person a chance to move the phone away from their ear, which I do periodically. There are certain things that are stimulating to me. I move the phone away. I learned that by how to deal with my mother. My relationship changed totally once I learned that trick with my mother. And then I'd put it back, and when she took a breath of air, I'd say, "Oh, how's your sister doing, Mom?" Same principle. Or I say, "God, let me hear this with your ears." Sometimes I can't believe what I choose to listen to in the course of a day. Sometimes it's too much. And what do? I ask God, "God, may I hear this with your ears?" Okay. But by the way, I want to tell you what happens when someone's gotten into my frequency by telling me something explicit. I immediately call someone up on the phone and I say, "This guy said this to me. I've caught it. I'm giving it to you. You get rid of it." Because what happens is what's explicit for you and difficult for you to hear might not be difficult for me to hear. But something that's innocently said, you've said, can be tough for me. And so there's no predicting it. I just know I give it away. And the guy I sponsor, he's sober 24 years, 25 years now. He'll call me periodically. He said, "Harvey, I got something for you to carry for me. Someone just said this and it got stuck on me." Someone had a question first. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like Roy K. Disagreed with you in regard to triggering the rest of the group, because he specifically writes that it's not the person has to go. He doesn't say you should quietly raise your hand and you walk out of the group.
Absolutely. But let me tell you, I never had a phone call with Roy where he didn't explicitly share his weakness. And what does he say throughout the book? Everywhere, especially in How to Run a Meeting. He says we share with our weakness. Now, let's talk about that piece. And you reread it and see how he says it. We have in Nashville the 30-day sobriety imperative. So guys who aren't sober their first 30 days do not talk at the meeting till the second part of the meeting. So that if anyone is sharing explicitly in the beginning of the meeting, it's done from recovery. We shut people up who are talking explicitly, who have just come in from a porno and are drunk out of their minds. We shut them up. So what I'm saying is about, first of all, talking to your sponsor. Your sponsor also has the right to say, and I've done it many times, "Hey, you're so drunk right now, I really don't want to hear this." And I tell many people, don't call me for about 2 weeks till you sober up. So all these are truths, and they have to be taken. Nothing's rougher than having someone just been masturbating for hours, coming into a meeting, telling you every detail of what he was thinking and masturbating with. So that's absolutely right.
You're saying it has to be shared from a place of weakness.
And from recovery. And that the sponsor or the chairperson has some responsibilities. We're so tiptoeish in this fellowship, it's amazing. In AA, they think nothing about saying, "Take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth," when you first come in. We just are too high class to say words like that. So you're absolutely right. And what I'm saying needs to be taken in the context of time and place. And who's saying it? Well, he's there.
And AA, I've been at meetings where they try to get a point together, they throw $20 all the time and say, go get drunk. What do you say about doing that in that?
I do it all the time.
Literally?
I tell people, hey, do you need me to... A guy once called me, I was sponsoring, and he said, oh, I just got to call that woman. I'm going to stop at a phone booth. That was before the portable, mobile phones. I'm going to stop the phone booth, call the gal to look her name up in the book. And I said, stay where you are. I'm going to bring you a whole bag full of quarters so you can keep calling her all day. And he started to laugh, and the spell was broken. And anyone you offered $20 to go drink who's going to take it was already going to go get drunk anyway. You know, we're not here to help people get sober. We're here to stay sober. It happens that the way I stay sober is by giving it away. But this is not a codependency haven. This is a place, and so for people who keep relapsing, I love them, but I don't socialize with them. Because if they look too good, relapsing, my brain says, gee, they look pretty good. I bet I could get away with it. That's what my disease says to me. Okay, now, I'm going to answer that question, but there's going to be a tendency to protect yourselves and not share at a deeper level by asking me questions. So I'm going to kick this one back to you right after this question, because I want to hear about where your brain starts relapsing, how it begins. Yeah.
Yeah, does meditation play any role in your recovery and also in relapse prevention?
I couldn't meditate for years. I'd get aroused.
And today?
I'd meditate, but I'm so ADD, it's so hard for me to meditate. And I all but got 5 minutes of doing my TM while we were doing this. I just accept that I'm not one of these 20-minute meditators twice a day. And somehow I've stayed sober, and Jess taught me that one day we talked about it, and he brought to my attention that many of us are meditating most of the day. When I'm talking to God, or when I'm walking down the street and I see those green leaves and what he's created, and my brain stopping to look at that green leaves, you know. Yes, I used to go around shaming myself that I don't classically meditate enough, and realize that a great deal of my day, I was sharing with someone that I don't do all the fancy prayers. It's not for me. But when I'm wrapping the straps and counting the straps, I'm in a meditative state. And it might take me 3 minutes or 2 minutes to say, Shema, do that. I'm in a meditative state. I'm really not thinking about too much. But if I did that for too long, and if I take a prayer book and start davening, I'm going to start thinking about every wild thing you could imagine. Because that's what my brain does. Sometimes shul is impossible for me. And thank God I have sat at enough meetings with some of the nicest, sincere Christian people. And church is impossible for them. It's torturous, especially because of the women there. And, you know, I always have to remember, I don't find God in church. Oh, church, I don't go to church, but in shul. You can see the crowds I talk to. I don't find God in shul. I find God and I bring him to shul. You know, and all the stuff we're going to say, again, and I've said it all weekend, if anything I say isn't found in the Torah, you know I'm full of shit. Because there is nothing I have seen in 12-step program that's not there. We just don't know where to find it, even though people think they're great Torah scholars and Talmudic scholars. And people forget what we're saying is so similar to what the Baal Shems would say about that connection to God, getting connected to God. And how do we get connected to God? What a gift I have in connection. When I see a pair of big boobs and I'm saying, God, whatever it is I'm looking for in her breasts, may I find in you. I have done an 11th step. And what if I didn't have those thoughts in my mind periodically? I'd miss talking to God so much through my day. And one of my most important prayers for me is to say, God, thank you for reminding me I'm still sick. If I ever thought I was cured, man, what the hell do I need God for? I need the program for. Okay. So I want to hear from you guys a bit where I'm going to ask Shem. Yes, this weekend, first of all, the guy's a miracle. His sponsor knew exactly what to tell him to do this weekend, and it worked. And I was wrong, the sponsor was right. But, you know, remember when you get a compliment from someone in the program, like my sponsor told me, when I had a standing ovation, and I went and told him, God, I had a standing ovation for my talk, and he said, well, what do you expect from a group of drunks? But he'd say it's worse, what do you expect from a group of sick drunks? So, you know, be careful any compliments you get from me. But where does yours begin? Simply.
All right. The girl walks by. I just want to see who it is, what she's wearing, or I'm passing by a newsstand. Just which magazines are they selling? I don't want to lust now. I don't want to have sex now. I'm staying sober today. I was curious which magazines are on the stand. I'm going to look. I'm keep on walking by.
So your relapse begins with curiosity.
Curiosity, yeah, or boredom.
Okay.
Frustration. I'm working.
Okay. So what happens in your brain? Share with us when you're walking by the newsstand. Do you know the newsstand is there? Are you used to the newsstand being there?
Yeah, well, let's say yesterday I went to the newsstand to buy a pack of cigarettes.
Okay.
My destination was the newsstand.
Okay. Okay. So, group, where's his relapse?
It's about the newsstand.
Yeah. It's when, yeah, buying the cigarettes at a newsstand and not finding having someone get him the whole big pack of.
The newsstand, you went to newsstand, but when you see the girls on the street, yeah, it's the curiosity you want to see, you want to see who they are.
Right.
There you went some. What's about with the girl? When
Okay,
anyway.
but we're going to take it one step. This cigarette is the greatest piece. Is the greatest piece of this. How innocuous, how innocent the relapse begins. Meaning that we know the newsstand is a problem. In my case, it was drive-in markets. I could not go to a drive-in market alone for a year or two. So what it is the self-honesty is going back to that self-honesty. can I successfully buy cigarettes in newsstands? See, people think it's about lust. It looks like he really wants to get sober. He really likes this stuff. But something happens that he's not aware of, that it's already too late. Once the phenomenon of craving kicks in, it's already too late. You can't stop it. Okay? So analyzing now, let's take yours. Pursue that with it.
I think you said it was the curiosity to watch the girl on the street, what it looks like. And I'm just looking just to see. I just want to get an idea.
Okay. So how can you deal with the curiosity? That concept, curiosity. What can we do to get in front of the curiosity?
My problem is different than everybody else's.
By the way, this is not a typical SA meeting.
I said it jokingly. He knows his solution because now the cigarette is the problem. Me, the girls are everywhere. I know everybody has this issue. I said it as a joke, but I don't know the solution to that. The girls are everywhere. Everywhere I turn, they're there.
For me, as soon as I walk out,
No, we're not going to leave his first.
No, I'm answering.
Okay, good.
For me, as soon as I walk outside, it starts going through my head. Don't look. It's constantly running through my head. You know, I find every block,
Okay.
I find something to stare at on the street.
Okay, now that second piece is the important piece, because the first piece, I want to show you what happens with the first piece. Whatever you do, group, I don't want you to picture a hippopotamus. What did you do immediately? Okay. The minute you say, I'm not going to look, you're going to look. It doesn't matter how you try it. There's only one way not to do it, and you got it. Is if I say about don't picture a hippopotamus, only way not to picture a hippopotamus is to immediately picture a giraffe. You immediately have to put in a different picture. So the concept of that, and in my case, try not being able to see men and women. Okay? What do you do? So let's hear some of your suggestions.
I know what's on the second floor of every building, all the blocks around me. That's what I stare at. I find something on the top of the building, a tree, something in the distance on every block that I stare at while I walk down the street.
Yesterday, I had Saturday, the privilege of this guy who was really suffering coming up to me. Because it was really very difficult for him at the JSS, seeing the women there. And he wanted me to give him some real esoteric, sophisticated help. And I said to him, take off your glasses. And he said, what? And I said, take them off now. And he finally took them off. And I said, first I asked him, can you see anything without your glasses? He said, yeah, but it's all blurred. I said, perfect. And then I told him to go up to his room and leave his glasses there. And the next day he came in. And he was so delighted. And he ran up to me. He said, they're still in my room. The program is so simple, most people can't get it. It's not about trying to stop noticing the women. You cannot not stop noticing the women.
What about giving it to God?
Hey, relax for a while with this guy. Okay. Yeah.
You spoke before about the 5 paragraphs in the blue book about the individual. that's where my relapse starts. When I stop being honest, then I'm quote going to the store for cigarettes.
Right.
Then I'm quote going to the supermarket to buy it. I'm not going to the supermarket to buy whatever I'm putting in my head. I'm lying to myself because I really want to go to the supermarket because that's where I get triggered by whatever I'm going to see in the supermarket, whether it be a young guy. It makes no difference. And I will not, and I'm very, very good at lying to myself. I'm very, very good at telling myself stories. That's where my relapse starts, and then it just puts me down the road. Because after I start doing that, I can do anything.
Right.
It's just that simple. If a lot of people talk to me, I don't know. The second someone tells me I don't know, I say stop. Of course you know. Before you walked in that door, you could tell me I don't know. That poor young man could never say I don't know again, because now he knows. Because we just told him.
Right. Okay. Now let's go back to your question about God. Okay. Would you ever, maybe you would you ask me that question if I was talking about diabetes?
I don't think I had the opportunity to do that with diabetes. I think this is different. It's mental.
Okay. See, this is the core. This is at the heart of it. This program is very difficult to get without the disease model. People get real disappointed, especially people who have been devout and have been trying to use God to get better. And until I was willing to see that God invented insulin to help the diabetic, it was difficult for me to accept that God invented SA to help people with the disease of sexaholism. So God is very much in the equation. But it's very much like the book of Esther. And until you accept in this program that God is very much like in the book of Esther, where you can't find his name, but he's the book.
I did it this week. It worked for me.
Yeah, and I'm delighted, and I hope it continues, and it probably will. But one day at a time. There are people that we're dealing with who need to deal with it as it's dealt with in the book of Esther. That God is all there, but it's not in the most obvious way. It's in the way of Mordecai sitting in the right spot at the right time. It's about Esther being willing to walk into the room at the right moment. That's what this is for me. And since many people do have problems with relapsing, we're working on it at this level. We've got about 3-4 minutes left. Yes.
Thinking about the relapse prevention for myself. I know that coming here every single morning, I pass by a place that I've acted out previously. And the way I've dealt with it was by talking with people about it, my sponsor with others, instead of driving an extra 15 minutes around. So I'm wondering for myself if I'm fooling myself with that, or is it good enough that I'm talking to people about it, I'm not holding the secret inside?
I could not go downtown Nashville alone for 2 years. There was a certain street that was my boundary. I could not go into, my office was near a park that I used to act out in. I could not go through that park for years. I had to walk around it. Because I believe I'm allergic to some things. And the program's about comfort and trying to find what way is easiest for you to do. And sometimes you just have to go way out of your way and avoid certain areas. And then lo and behold, you don't have to worry as much about calling as much because you just change your your approach. So that's the piece, the self-honesty piece that a lot of people, I don't know if that's answering your question. If not, ask it again. Okay, we got, wait, someone who hasn't spoken. And
Hi, I'm Shoal.
hi, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
I just want to dissect a little bit my relapse, because I had 3 years and 3 months sobriety.
Thank you.
And my relapse started with me trying to get back with my wife, and people are telling me that the pressure of my wife of getting back with my wife, that intimacy being very hard for me, had caused me to look for a way of sabotaging it and of slipping out of this, of getting back with my wife by sabotaging it and doing it in that way. Instead of just saying I'm not ready, or this is not for me yet, I decided to start. So I started with food. I gained a lot of weight and the food stopped working. And then I realized for 2 weeks I was driving through Brooklyn areas and I was looking at women and more than I used to. The obsession I used to left me. I used to see a woman, I used to look away. And I wouldn't, but here I realized the lust had slipped in little by little, and I don't want to fool myself and think that I just happened to one day have $600 in my pocket and just decided to go to a prostitute in Manhattan.
Right.
So where do you think the relapse started from?
Right. You know, I think you've said it. You know, your wife over the years, you've had difficulty with that area, and something's possibly connected. And you're eating. I think you've said it all. That you've kind of inventoried the relapse. Now, what do you want to do about it?
Get sober.
Yeah. Now, what do you want to do about it? So this is a great example for you. The relapse prevention is probably going to be for you to go high gear back to OA and really work the hell out of that program. And, you know, to each his own. I certainly don't have the specifics, but you have them. You all know. You know, I mentioned last night, we ask God for help. He tells us, and then we tell him he's wrong. So he's told you the answers. He tells all of us the answers. It's what, you know, what to do with that answer. Hi.
Sometimes I feel like I'm fooling myself, and I know you gotta be honest. I don't know when I am being honest with myself and when I'm not being honest with myself.
That's where your sponsor comes in, and by being totally explicit with your sponsor. And by not puffing the conversation. Meaning, I cannot call my sponsor and give him all the background information so that he'll end up agreeing with me. I have to just go right for it. Hey, this is what I'm doing. What do you think about it? Okay? That's it, guys.
I just had another scenario. If you have 2 minutes, I don't know.
Yeah, why don't whoever wants to leave, and I'll hang around for about 10 more minutes, and whoever wants to, you know, you go back to your real world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Harvey, thanks. I have a problem with ADD. In Yardley, I don't know if you know Michael J. He started the Yardley group. So I have the mazel, these guys are into back to basics. And that's I started my recovery in that. Big book thumping and everything. He told me you have to do minimum 5 minutes meditation a day. Really, it should be 15. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So what did I do? In the end, I was that desperate. I went to the big book, pages 86 to 88, read it every day, line by line, followed the instructions, and instead of meditating on Blue Yonder, I meditated on a day of recovery, God's will. God's will, and it works. It really works. And that's the real recovery. That's the real recovery. It's more than sobriety. You know, I don't look at, I'm not tool heavy, I'm step heavy. And that works for me. But it's because I fell into that group, and they focus on the steps.
You're fortunate.
I need to bring something to your attention. Perhaps you can help me out with this. Yeah. Okay. Relationship-wise, with my parents. Besides my lust addiction, I've been for years addicted to them. That was my other safe haven that caused me the most pain, and as much pain as I had, the more I went back. Being in the program for a little over 2 months now, okay, I sort of backed away from them almost completely. I have such hatred and such animosity and such pain from my life with them that I can't look at him in the eye. I can't talk to him. It makes me just churn around inside, and it kills me. Last night they wanted to come over to my home. They see my kids. They realize something's up with me. Okay, and I let them come over. I spoke to my mother, which the relationship is a lot better. I couldn't freaking look my father in the eyes for more than 2 seconds. I didn't say more than 2 words to him in the half hour he was in my home. And I don't know how to deal with that.
You don't have to deal with it. But let me tell you, my mother stabbed me when I was about 16. Took a hollow knife. Go beat that one.
My mother was almost there. Yeah. My mother's thing used to be, I'll shout you.
Yes. And, and what happened, once I used to say I was so bad that my mother got angry at me and she needed to hit me, so she took the first thing she could find and tried hitting me with the flat of the bread knife, and I turned around and she cut me by accident, and we went to the emergency. Once I said my mother stabbed me, I was free, because I understood only a very sick person could have done that to herself. Once I saw how sick she was, all kinds of forgiveness and interaction, and how to interact and protect myself against bargains too, came up. My way, I know I was able, she's been dead, she rested for 6, 7 years, but I knew I couldn't be with her for more than 45 minutes to an hour. Then the crazies would start coming in. So I would go visit her and always have her, leave. Turned out she didn't need me much there longer anyway. She just wanted to know I cared enough that I should care.
How do you get to the point to feel that?
You can't, but what you do is you get some boundaries with people. But if we stay in resentment, chances are we'll get trouble. That's what the big book tells us.
Harvey, could it be that we're blaming our parents for our diseases while we don't want to forgive them and look at them as because they're the cause of me being successful?
Well, once you accept the disease model, it's so once you accept the disease model, you would have gotten this no matter what.
I'm just trying right now to figure out what disease my parents have and what their addiction is.
Statistically, if you had a guess, your father's a chronic masturbator. Statistically, that he's been doing this stuff for years.
My father
in
told me he's
secrecy.
72 years old. He says from now on, after he heard about my saying, he's going to fight it. And he's not going to, when he sees the pornography magazines, he's not going to look at them anymore. He's 72 years old. He's not going to look at them anymore. He's going to throw them away right away.
But we don't want to ever compute that our fathers might be, or if he's not masturbating, he's seeing a woman and doing all kinds of stuff, and he's had to make this, I don't know him, so I could say all this. Making this very rigid look and all.
And it's unbelievable. The guy at the keynote speaker, when he mentioned the thing with the barbershop and the magazines, it started playing back in my mind, because I remember my father always used to take his little kid to a specific barbershop, and whenever we were there, he took a round turn into the back room. And later on, I used to go there.
and then it goes on to the next generation.
Yes.
I just found
Now,
my 14-year-old on the computer.
Sure, absolutely.
Looking at lingerie
yeah,
things.
Right. Yeah, you would mention that. What do? You're the only big book people will ever get to read. Your father's going to get recovery through you. He's going to know something over is different. He's going to see it. Okay? And then he's going to get some of this indirectly. Or else he's going to get the knockers of down deep knowing, especially if you share with him even on a vague level, that you have sexual addiction issues, and not blame them. I'm going to tell you about the blame business. My mother stabbed me. She never, in all my recovery, would say anything about it. One day I went to a meeting in Rochester, and this woman gave a talk on how her brother sexually abused her for years. And then he became a priest. And as an adult, he continued to sexually abuse her. And her mother always knew about it. And she hated her mother for letting her brother, she just had nothing to do with her family. And so she hated her mother, but one day she heard her mother was dying. She went to her mother's room. The story I told yesterday. She went to their mother's dying room, held her mother, and told her mother all the things she wished her mother would have said to her. Well, I left that room and I went and I called my mother. And I said, Mom, I just want to tell you how much I love you. And out of nowhere she said, but how could you with what I did to you? And it was the love that freed her to be able to make an amends. But by my saying, are you piece of shit, what kind of mother are you to have stabbed your son? That wouldn't do it. She's a sick woman. It took the love. We put so much love into these empty wells. My mother was an empty well. Could not get love from her. I poured in enough love over the years, plus she got a stroke, which might have helped, that one day she said, I love you, Papa. I've never heard those words from her.
You know my father. Your mother's my mother.
You remember they're going to some conventions.
Yeah. So your job is to act as if, and periodically, even though you might push your way or whatever, to when you see him, to go give him a kiss on the cheek or a hug, whatever it is. And you'll feel him freeze up or what? When my mother got craziest, and I'd visit her, and she would start on me, I would get up and go to her chair, but she was paralyzed, and kiss her on the forehead and say, Mom, you must be frightened right now. There's something you want to talk to me about. That she gets crazy when she gets frightened. She had no tools. You know, like I had no tools. And when she said to me that day on the phone, how could you love me with what I did to you? I was able to say to her, Mom, I forgave you a long time ago, like I hope my kids have forgiven me for what I've done with them. Yes, I've done a lot of screwing up on my kids. I used to bring the guys home to the house. They'd hear rumors about me. You know, 4 teenage sons having to live through me at the worst of my disease.
Well, that I can't relate to because my father was never home.
Yeah, I had one of those too.
Yep. Wow.
But, you know, to give it away. Yeah.
You gotta leave in a few minutes.
Okay.
So.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Harvey.